Yeah, yeah, go, do your thing. Redirecting. Yeah, yeah, go, do your thing.
I heard some echo, so I guess the live stream is up.
Yeah, let me see. What should I do here? Let me turn that down then. Um, so it's up. Okay, here we go. All right. Yeah, we are live streaming. I am Eric Denton. Welcome to the Falsifiable Podcast, and I have with me Sam Kuypers. Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? What is your background? All that good stuff.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I am a theoretical physicist. I live and work in Montreal at the moment, where I'm employed
Mm.
at Université de Montréal, and I do quantum information, and that means like I'm interested in foundational questions like those relating to time. What are our best theories of time? How do we describe it? And also in many worlds in the effort interpretation. And
Mm.
I come at all of those things from a quantum information background. Uh,
Okay. Um, hey, speaking on this, Sam, have you ever seen the movie Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie?
oh yeah, I've been meaning to watch that for a while. I thought the concept was really intriguing. That like, there's two areas of time that are happening kind of simultaneously.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like so I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I watched like half of it last night. And
Cool.
it's actually really hard to describe because the movie just starts and you're in it, and then you're having to the exposition is happening simultaneously as the movie's going, so you're having to really figure it out, and you really don't figure it out. It's a movie that you'd have to watch, I guess, several times. But the concept is this case that time is like entropy unfolding, like eggs, they break, they don't ever reassemble. This is like the arrow of time moving forward. Now, I'm not even sure. I want you to correct any of this. This is my goal here with
Yeah.
just this first part. There seems to be an arrow of time. It feels that way instinctively. We as people think that. We see eggs break. We see your room gets messy. It never gets clean. And in this movie, Tenet, there's like another thing that's happening where there's these objects that are coming from the future and they're intersecting with, what's going on now. So you have this
Yeah.
thing that's happening. What is time? Is this how time works? Is time simply entropy that's happening, or what is time? Can you explain that in any way?
Yeah, so there's several questions there. So I like to unentangle them a bit.
Mm,
Um, so there is first there is the question of just what do we mean with time more generally?
mm,
Uh, and then there's also the question of what is the arrow of time, and those are separate.
yeah.
Those are separate questions. So there's time, which um, time is the thing that we use to describe change with. So things are changing in the world. And to explain why they are changing, we invoke this idea that there's time, and that then in fundamental physics, you will say, well, then there's equations of motion and initial conditions. But more generally, like even in the everyday sense, we have time just because like things were different yesterday than they are today, and to speak meaningful about that, we introduce this concept of time. But then there's also, besides uh, there being change, there seems to be change that only happens in one direction.
Mm,
So, as you were saying, uh, why is it that like certain processes only seem to happen one way and not another? Why do we never see an egg reassemble after, it's been lying on the floor, uh, spread out, like broken? Why don't we see it like rising up and then reassembling itself on the table? Uh, which the one process happens all the time where people drop an egg and
mm,
then it breaks. That is clearly a thing which can happen. The other thing is not. Apparently, that is not a thing which can happen. The problem is that our our best understanding of fundamental physics tells us that the laws governing the universe are symmetric in both directions of time. So if something can happen one way, then the other thing, it can also happen backwards in time.
Mm,
So that's known as the problem that's known as the arrow of time, the problem of
mm,
the arrow of time. So how can it be that although the laws of physics are time symmetric, there appears to be asymmetries in the things that can happen in the universe, like eggs reassembling themselves is not a thing that we would expect to happen.
mm,
Um, so that's a more specific problem. That's a problem that exists in thermodynamics. But then the thing which uh, is slightly more general than that was this idea of like what is time, even disregarding the arrow of time, even disregarding the fact that certain things seem to happen only one way. There's also just a question of like what is it, what is time, why is change happening in the universe, things like that. So those are the two kind of separate but very related concepts.
mm,
Um, there is there. Speaking of Tenet, so this fits in quite nicely. Actually, it's almost like we set this up. But there's a book by Julian Barber called The Janus Point,
mm,
which is he the way he tries to resolve this tension is by saying, well, it might be that there's a point in the past where I think he calls it complexity was minimal. So it's kind of like if you go back to the Big Bang, and then you go backwards further than the Big Bang in his model, then in fact you're going forwards in time again in another direction. So it's kind of like you can imagine there's this point and this is the Big Bang. Things happen forward in time from then on for us. But if we were to rewind beyond that point, there's like another universe where things are happening kind of for us they would be happening backwards in time, but for them it's another forward looking.
mm, mhm.
It's kind of like there's two directions in which there is an arrow of time and they emerge from the same point. Which is a little bit like the Tenet idea, right? Because you have
Right.
one
Yeah.
world with two arrows of time in it. Um, I uh, I don't know enough about the arrow of time specifically to really have an opinion on whether that is the way to go. I find the model like it's a very intriguing idea, and Julian has lots of very intriguing ideas about time. Um, but so yeah, but it's funny because it's very much like what you were just describing with Tenet.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's this thing that happened to me, and I've actually freaked myself out thinking about this, which is when you play a video game, you know how the video game is kind of assimilating itself as you go. Like, well, older video games were more like this. So you're in a large world, and
Yes.
then you see in the distance it's kind of gray, and as you move forward, it comes and you see it go, tut, 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 tut,
Yeah,
tut, and the
yeah.
pixels come along. I feel like that's kind of how time is. So if you think of yourself this subjectively, this isn't the truth. I don't know if this is true, but like this is how I feel about it is that I am moving forward. But the thing is that is there something already ahead of me? Is time like, and I think Deutsch talks about this in the Fabric of Reality, and this chapter I read it so long ago, but it was extremely perplexing to me. Is time sort of like a block? Are we living in a block where there's already a future, there's already a past, and we're just like in this thing, like, or is it assembling as we head forward? Is everything just creating as
Right,
we go?
right, right.
Do you see what
Yes.
I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So those are two different views of time. One of them I think is called presentism, which is the
Mm,
view that you described where it's like things are being generated, like the new configurations and every moment in time is being generated as you go along, kind of like in the video game analogy that you were describing. But I
yeah.
think they still do this, but they've become more subtle at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can't
Uh,
see it as much anymore.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's they still do that kind of thing where like they make stuff that's very far away, a little bit more grainy, but you can't notice it from that distance. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that view of time is called presentism,
Mm,
if I recall correctly. And the other view is that well, there's several views, but the other view that you were describing is the block universe view, which is this idea that there is fundamentally no change in the world, in the
mm,
sense that if you look at uh, how to best put this, the thing you were describing, like the future already exists, and all the moments that you can imagine, therefore also exist. Also, the past exists in the same way, and
yeah.
we're in them. So we are confined to like particular slices of this block, but the block already exists in full.
Mm,
And so it's not like the future is still to come into existence. We're just not in the future. But the
mm,
future, if you were to have a God's eye view of the universe and all of space and all of time, it would already be there. The future is not
right.
something that has to be created in that
Mm,
sense. Um, and that's the view of time which I think is most compelling for several reasons. For one thing, it's kind of the view of time that Einstein's general relativity gives us. So
mm,
uh, in space-time is kind of a block universe. Like there is all of space and all of time, or rather, there is all of space-time, the interconnected thing. And everything, all the change happens within space-time. Like space-time is not itself a thing which then changes because change happens relative to time, and that's already inside space-time. So yes, it's so that's one argument in favor of this view. There's also we have theories from quantum mechanics which are basically shows the same idea
mm,
from a different angle, from a quantum angle, and they're all very compelling. And they all the main argument I would give for them is always that uh, if we want to explain change in a way that's not circular, then you have to explain change in terms of things which are not themselves changing. Like if I were to say, well, that thing, like, for example, if I said to you, like, today is different than yesterday because it's a different time, you know, today is another day, so the world looks different because we've progressed in time. Then you could say, but why have we, like, why do we progress through time? Like, why is time itself changing then?
right. Yeah, yeah.
So otherwise it becomes, so if I give you an explanation like that, that's kind of circular. Like I have explained something, but I've not explained change itself.
Right. Yeah.
So the block universe allows you to say, well, there is, like, I can explain time and change in terms of things which are not changing, namely the block universe, and that avoids the circularity.
Hmm. Man, that's great. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Parmenides. Is that who it was that
Yeah.
everything is basically still or unmoving, and then Heraclitus, everything is moving, or whatever it is. I forget this, but and then Democritus and all they talked about atoms, and this allows for movement within things like
Yes.
that. Um, Even back then, they were thinking about what we're talking about right now and doing these amazing guesses where they couldn't confirm any of this. I mean, they couldn't, there was no like falsification or anything like that at the time. But it's kind of cool to think that here we are in this in our time right now, still talking about what these guys were talking about. And it's not necessarily the same thing. They weren't like quantum physicists or they didn't know what atoms were or anything. But it is cool that they thought like, okay, there's tiny little particles everywhere, and we're
Yes.
moving. They're colliding with one another, and this is what's forming this picture that we see. And I just like to think like that is such a cool guess. I mean, that would have been fun to sit there and listen to these guys, whether it was Democritus or I forget it starts with an L, the other guy that was like famous for this. But yeah, that's so cool. And these questions are so strange. But as far as this goes, though, so you as a physicist, you're the most compelled on this notion of the block universe. Is that what you're saying right
Yes.
now?
Yes.
Okay, okay, yeah.
And yeah, and so to add a little bit to that, because I agree that I mean Popper has a very nice account of this in I think it's either the World of Parmenides or in the Myth of the Framework. I think it's actually Myth of the Framework.
Mm,
Comes to it, but so as you said, Parmenides had a theory that the world was unchanging,
hmm
that change was just our sense organs deceiving us. He was very, very into this philosophy, which I think is true as well, that our knowledge of the world is very limited in the sense that we have, well, our sense perceptions, our access to the world is limited. It's not our knowledge, but it's our ability to access the outside world through our sense perceptions is quite limited, and um, he was keen to say that change was one of these illusions.
Mm.
And the reason he thought that was because he had a very nice theory about the moon. So Heraclitus had this theory that the moon, he wanted to explain the waxing and waning of the moon. So the problem was why, it's kind of an odd thing if you look at the night sky. Why is the moon waxing and waning compared to like the sun is not doing that. The sun is rising and setting, but it's not doing the same thing as the moon is. And he thought that,
Yeah,
that it would be
that's
like,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's an odd, it's a nice problem. It's a very like it's already interesting that they noticed
Mm.
this. And his theory was that it was like a bowl. So it's like there's a bowl with fire. So there's
Mm.
something cup with fire. And when the cup is turned away from you, you're not seeing the fire. And like as it's turning towards you, you see more and more of it, and then you see all of it, and then it turns away from you again.
Yeah, yeah. Man,
And,
that's a
and
yeah, that's interesting in itself. I mean, it's wrong, but that's a good, also a cool guess. Oh,
yeah, it's
but
like
continue there.
yeah, it's it fits quite nicely, right? Like if you think about a cup rotating and then um it's an interesting guess. And Parmenides realized that it was just that the moon was being lit by the sun
Mm.
from so sometimes the Earth was covering. I'm not sure. I've forgotten this a bit of it, but he realized that there was a that the moon was being lit from the sun, and I think he must have realized that the Earth was in between them or something. But now I'm hesitant to say that. But anyway, the
Yeah.
the main thing he realized was that the moon itself was not changing its shape.
Mm.
So the moon was a spherical object, and it's just that sometimes we saw different angles from it being lit up, and sometimes we saw the whole thing being lit up. So he realized this thing that we thought was changing was actually itself stationary. So he thought that the underlying reality is just that the moon is a spherical object, and all the things that we perceive as change were not really change at all because it was just it being lit differently.
Mm.
And he kind of thought of light as not being really a fundamental thing about the universe. He thought, well, it's just light hitting it differently every now and then. Um, and so from that, he generalized like, okay, all the movement that we see around the world, around us, is really just kind of a sense perception. Is we're just being fooled by our senses. And he had a cute little mathematical proof, or isn't he? Not really a mathematical proof, but he had a like a an axiomatic theory where he
Yeah.
said if things can move, like if you assume that the world is full of stuff, then which he assumed was necessary because otherwise there would be nothing, and there being nothing would be crazy. So anywhere where there would be nothing, you would immediately have stuff rushing to fill up the void. So there was no
Mm.
void. There was no void in the world. There was only matter. And then if the world is full of matter, well, then nothing can move because all the matter prevents the other matter from moving,
Mm.
and so therefore there can be no change. Uh, and one, so he overlooked several things, but again, it's like interesting that he had a little axiomatic theory. For one thing, it could be that it was like water. I mean, water is able to move. You have eddies and vortices and things, so that you can still have movement within a body of liquid that is completely filled up.
Mm-hmm.
And then Democritus, or Democritus, I never know which pronunciation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he realized he thought, well, there is movement, so clearly this theory that Parmenides had must be wrong. So there is, he said, well, there is a void, and there's atoms in the void, and they allow for change. So it's a
Mm.
very sophisticated worldview. I mean, these are still ideas that we grapple with today. I mean, atomism, really, atomism comes from the Greeks. Like it was adopted later by Descartes and then the early atomists, and it's only in the last century and a half or something that we've really started taking it uh, more seriously and developing very precise mathematical theories of it.
Mm.
But they all stem from the Greeks, and similarly other problems
Yeah,
uh,
it's
exist. They knew them already, and they're
right.
still with us, and we're still working on resolving them to some extent.
Man, yeah, it's very cool. But again, and you and I we're part of the Conjecture Institute, which is really neat. And it's all putting forth ideas from Karl Popper, David Deutsch, mainly. I mean, really at the at bottom, sort of a Karl Popper and Deutsch obviously extends on that. You've worked with Deutsch, um, but before we get to that, we'll go for like maybe 30 more minutes, Sam, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Um, I was gonna, before we leave movies though, I just wanted to talk one more time about again, Christopher Nolan. Did you see Oppenheimer?
Yes.
Okay, what were your thoughts on that movie as a theoretical physicist?
I thought it was excellent. I thought it was a really good movie.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, what were my thoughts at the time? I think it was well done in that uh, yeah, seeing how people came together. See, I liked the innovations that they had to go through at the time. For example, I thought it was interesting that uh, they realized they needed to put these people together in the same location, house their families, to
Mm,
work on this project long term. I thought it was interesting that you could kind of see they just, you know, the threshold of inventing. Well, it's a little bit. I meant to say that they were at the threshold of inventing quantum theory. Quantum theory had just come about, is what I should have said,
mm,
a couple of years prior to that. And they were working through all the ramifications of this new theory very rapidly, which is, of course, one of the reasons why they started thinking about the atomic bomb and the possibility that maybe the Nazis were building one. And I thought that was interesting that like the way that fundamental science was playing a really big role in several ways in World War II. I mean, Oppenheimer and the atomic bomb was one aspect of that. Alan Turing and computer science were another very important
mm,
aspect of the war. So it's very impressive. I liked a ton of stuff about the movie. I like the just the grandeur of it. Like
mm.
it
Right,
felt
yeah.
so, it felt like it was a massive undertaking, and yeah, I think they depicted that correctly. That the way in which they were doing something extremely, uh, yeah, don't know quite how to describe like important or it's just a massive undertaking at the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, very fascinating movie.
Oh man, it was good. And just from an aesthetic point of view, I thought like if I were a physicist, I'd be watching this like, man, this makes it look super cool. Like the job is like all these guys are just really cool, man. They're going around smoking pipes and just
Yeah.
chit-chatting about they got equations behind them and all this kind of stuff. Um yeah, it's one of those things where people that aren't physicists, the thing that and I whenever I talked to Deutsch recently on the pod, um, the one thing that's frustrating, I think, for people like myself, as far as physics and science goes, is, and it's not really a super big problem, but people like myself who are not mathematically inclined, I almost have zero interest, sadly, in math, and yet I love science and I read books about physics all the time. But
Mm.
obviously, if you're reading popular physics books, all you're reading is analogies the whole time. It's just analogies to what the world looks like or could be, whatever. And it's almost frustrating to me because like whenever I look at people doing that stuff or like Feynman or something, he would to my knowledge, I think he would like just for fun just be twiddling on his like the back of napkins and stuff, and this is just
Yeah.
fun to him. And to me, I just think like, oh my God, whenever I took like algebra, it was like a torturous affair. And like but I love science, and the sad thing, I guess what I'm getting to is that I try my best not to think of that stuff as magic, though. It's not, I don't want to think of it as like a black box that I never could attain. It's just simply, which it might, I don't know, but like, I think it's just the case that I'm just not completely fascinated with doing equations. Therefore, I have no interest in it. And I guess this will lead to a question, which is, do you find it interesting to do equations, or is it just like, or do you find math interesting in that way? Or Is that why you started down this path, or was it just like this a mountain that you just wanted to climb just because you wanted to understand the world? What was it that was, you know, because there's not many theoretical physicists out there. Your job is, I don't know the statistics or whatever, but I'm sure it's a limited field. But so what took you to it?
Um, yeah, so I was always interested mainly in the physics, and
Mm,
physics was the reason why I was then interested in the mathematics that you had to use to build physical theories with. More recently, I've learned to appreciate like very pure mathematics for its own sake. There's a great mathematician, Paul-Raymond Robichaud, who also lives near Montreal. Had conversations with him. I think he's also part of the institute.
okay.
Um, he uh, yeah, has persuaded me that even very pure mathematics is important and interesting. Not that I was completely unpersuaded of that before, but just he pressed home to me the importance of that. Um, yeah, but the sad thing I always think is that the people who are not interested, like whenever I tell someone I'm a theoretical physicist, they always tell me, okay, well, that interesting. I always hated physics in high school. That,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
which I think is such a shame because I don't really know why we put people through that. There's not much that you need to know about theoretical physics, if anything, really, to go about your daily life. So
Mm,
that always seems a bit odd to me. And uh, well, also what you said is true. I mean, like the same is true for lots of abstract mathematics. You just don't need like beyond uh, counting, multiplying, things like that. Having a basic understanding of real numbers, decimals, things like that. You don't really need mathematics that much in everyday life. Like as soon as
hmm.
you reach that point, which you reach at some point during primary school, everything else, like I'm not sure anyone will remember or need to remember, even if they do remember it, the stuff that they learned in
Or
high school.
imaginary numbers, this whole thing. I mean,
Yes.
what is that all about? Like, I got to that and I was like, what? I mean, and again, I'm like, I hope to God Feynman or somebody's using this because if not them, who? I mean, that's my question.
Yeah. Well,
But I
imaginary
mean,
numbers are actually they are actually very important again, but in theoretical
yeah,
physics. So in theoretical
yeah,
physics, they're used all the time, and
yeah.
you cannot do quantum theory, for example, without imaginary numbers. The name imaginary numbers is also a little bit unfortunate.
Misleading.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
imaginary; they are like perfectly real numbers. That uh, well,
Hmm.
they're I shouldn't confuse people, but they are uh, real in the sense, not in the sense of the real number line, but they are real in the sense that there's nothing uh, that is fake or it's not magic. They're just another kind of number.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. That
so
name is kind of unfortunate.
yes,
Yeah, so that's cool. So but as far as what is the day in the life of, if you could, this may be extremely hard. By the way, whoever's listening to this or watching this, it is Sunday, July 13th, and I am asking Sam Kuypers on the fly crazy questions kind of in the morning here, so he was kind enough to do this. But anyway, so like
my
what is the
pleasure.
day in the life of a theoretical physicist? Like when you get up, um I mean, what is your undertaking? What is your goal say? Let me frame this so it actually is attainable. What is your goal say for this year as far as your job, or is it open ended? What do you think? How do you
Yeah,
approach that?
it's reasonably open-ended. So um, I typically when I get up, I do some. I don't know. Have you heard of space repetition? This is my latest like hobby horse. Again, that's the thing that I learned from Paul. So
Hmm.
it's a way of making flashcards about certain topics. It can be about mathematics, can be about French or other languages and things like that.
Hmm.
And then the software allows you to review them. So I typically do math reviews in the morning, and then I will go about my day. I will try and work on papers. I will try and read textbooks to learn more material. So um, Yeah, it's a combination of like on an average day, it's a combination of reading stuff and writing and then answering emails and things like that. But that's like common to everyone, I think. And
Right.
um, that is if I'm not traveling. So there's also conferences, attending conferences, giving talks and things like that. But it's a little bit more unusual in the sense that that's not really uh, day-to-day life that happens once every couple of months or so.
Mm. Do you teach at all?
No,
Okay,
no,
no,
I'm pure research. Yeah.
man, that's cool. Like that would be super cool. Um, uh, so okay, let me see here. There was something I was going to talk about, and I wanted to ask you a question. So that's a little bit of bio. Let's go back to a little bit of physics, which is the multiverse, the quantum multiverse. This is how I understand it now. Correct me if this is misplaced or incorrect. So when we think of the multiverse, quantum mechanics, this is, as far as we know, this is true. This is the truest of the Everettian take is the truest way to look at everything. It's the deepest way. And as David Deutsch would say, it's not really Everettian quantum mechanics. It's just quantum mechanics. This is simply, if you take the theory seriously, this is what it's saying, and it happens to be that we live in a parallel universe, and it could be infinite or just a large number, whatever the case may be. But whenever I think about it now, and listening to Deutsch has been really helpful. I used to think of this idea of splitting, like whenever time splits, and I saw a great Alex Garland made this show called Devs, which I don't know if did you ever see that show?
I'm not sure I have seen it. No.
Oh man, check that show. It's DEVS, and this is going to lead me. I just thought about it. Determinism. I want to talk about it right after this, and free will really briefly. Again, this is early in the morning, folks, so these are crazy questions to get. But okay, so talking about the multiverse, how I understand it now is that whenever the Big Bang happened, as far as we know, this is our conjecture. This is the best guess on offer, as far as I know. Um, all the multiverse came into existence at that point and it and then it started like if you want to say it started separating. So you think of, and Deutsch has this great analogy with strata on the surface of the earth. There's not splitting that's happening because everything does within the universe that we're in right now, everything's still traveling at the speed of light. So there's points that are changing, but then that's rapidly that's going out. Those changes are happening at the speed of light, even at like pixel size or whatever the case may be. And all of that's happening simultaneously. So you're getting this stratified situation where, if you were to look at it, if you could potentially make it conceptual, it's like there's like an Earth, and you have some here, and it's getting a little fuzzy here and there. Am I on the right track with when thinking about this, or is this
Yes.
off?
Yeah. So it's true that the splitting is a little bit misleading. Thinking of
Mm-hmm.
things splitting is misleading because, for example, in that way of thinking about it, one question people often raise is, okay, but then where is the additional mass and energy coming from? Because
Mm-hmm.
that isn't just appearing out of nowhere. And so it's better to think about it as there are already, for example, multiple copies of all the systems in the room and in the universe in general. So there's multiple copies of you and me in particular, and many of them are the same. So they're identical. They're completely interchangeable. And then some of them become different from some of the others. So it's not that mass and energy has to come into existence. It's already there. But they're all these copies are the same initially, and then they start to differentiate. They start to become different. They branch as uh, is the kind of current terminology. And um, or yeah, that also maps onto this idea of the strata. So you have layers of Earth, but it's not that Earth had to come into existence for that. All of it was already there, but some of the layers are different.
Mm-hmm.
The others after time has elapsed. Um, and yeah, and you had another question which I now forget. So that was one part of what you were saying. So it's true that these analogies are correct, and then I forget the other part. Sorry, can you
Uh,
remind me?
Oh, I think that honestly, I think that that was it. I just wanted to make sure that my framing
Hmm.
of this so far is correct. Now, and because for the longest time I thought that I was under the assumption that what was happening is, there was literally a splitting that was happening, and then this, and that was put to bed whenever I listened to Deutsch talk about this, and he said no, no, no. He was like, this all came into existence at once, but
Yeah.
it was like at the same time. It could have been infinite. But then they started separating a little bit. And then you have this effect of like if you were to look at it on
Hmm.
the screen, or a screen, it's like it's sort of an undulating thing, I would think. I mean, again, this is kind of impossible to conceptualize, but so no, that's fascinating. So this is the other thing I was going to talk about, and I just mentioned Devs. Whoever is watching this, if you haven't seen Devs by Alex Garland, I think it's on Hulu. It's a great show. It's only like 10 episodes, but it deals with free will and it deals with the multiverse. And Alex Garland, to me, as a director, he did Ex Machina, which I think is probably,
Oh,
for my money, it's the best take on AI. That whole question, like in a conceptual form, I thought it was great. I thought it was just a great movie, even if it's wrong in a lot of ways. I thought it was fantastic. Um, but Okay, the idea of free will. Karl Popper has famously described himself as an indeterminist, and we were having a chat actually the other day with some of the fellows, and I struggle with this because I myself am sort of in the Sam Harris camp, the Robert Sapolsky camp. I tend to be a hard determinist,
right.
and because even if knowledge grows, and we know that we can't predict the future. We Popperians know that we can't predict the future because the future knowledge is unpredictable because it comes into existence randomly, like genetic mutations. They happen randomly, and then natural selection is able to do its work, and it disregards or continues. And this is how knowledge works. If you want to analogize it, a new idea comes in. If it's good, it somehow instantiates itself. If it's bad, it eventually, hopefully at least, it disregards itself and goes away. But I think that so let's say that we can't, even though we can't predict the future because of the unpredictability of the future growth of knowledge. I think I still think that it doesn't make sense to say that indeterminism plays any role
Hmm.
here because you're still a product of everything that came before. And this is great to kind of like wind down our conversation because now we're going back to this era of time situation. But uh, I can't get around the fact that no matter what, I am a product of just a few seconds ago, and I'm a product of my genes and my socioeconomic situation, my parents' situation, maybe somebody got slapped along the way, like, and then it completely, screwed up their life, and then somewhere down the road, I came out as a product
Hmm.
of that. Again, like, what is your take on this? Like, what do you have a stance on this whole determinism, compatibilism? Debate, and I would be so curious as to hear it. What do you think, Sam?
Yes. Yeah, so there's several points. So one of them first is, yeah, I'm a kind of compatibilist. The view Popper held is always confused me a bit because he seems to want something from fundamental physics that you just cannot get. Like he taunted Einstein for believing in the block universe and called him, I think he called him Einstein Parmenides. And to say like, well, that this view is just untenable. But I think, in fact, the block universe theory is correct, so that future states of the universe already exist.
Mm,
Um, but what is true? So also, I should say we don't have uh, a a very fleshed out theory of what free will is. It seems like it has still lots of open problems, but my my case for it would be that uh, if you consider the problem situation, so all the things you were just describing
mm,
add to a problem situation that someone has. So you could have. a problem situation caused by prior events. Uh, but our theory of knowledge doesn't say how the problem will be resolved. So from the point of view of knowledge, it's, knowledge creation is not a deterministic function which, given some input, will invariably produce a certain output. All we have is there's a problem situation, and then we can use creativity to solve that problem in, as you said, a completely unpredictable way. So there's no, I think, and this is where I think we should try and define free will.
Mm,
Not at the level of fundamental physics, as I mean, we're not going to do away with determinism in fundamental physics.
mm-hmm,
At a level of problem solving, there is no uh, algorithm or mechanism which produces a specific output given the problem situation that someone is in. So there is freedom there. For example, there's freedom in what theory do you adopt? The theory of knowledge doesn't actually say which criticisms and which theories you should prefer. It leaves that up to you. I
mm,
mean, obviously, the things which have better explanatory power should be preferable, but even that is not a thing which, it doesn't have predetermined criteria for what those things are. So there's freedom at that level, and uh, I think that's roughly what free will is. Free will is our creative capacity to create new explanations and to solve problems. And that, might be the case that we
mm,
have
mm-hmm,
states in which we've already solved the problem, but that's kind of irrelevant. Like we, that doesn't explain, like at the level of the mechanism of how this works, there is no, uh, the algorithm as we understand it, it's not really an algorithm in the usual sense because it's not a thing which takes a specific input and always outputs a specific output.
mm, mm-hmm,
So yeah, it's within our understanding of creativity that I think we should define free will, and we don't have a completely fleshed out theory of it yet, but there is clearly freedom there. Like there's clearly lots of things which it leaves up to us to choose.
mm, mm. Yeah, that is kind of a compatibilist look on it, which is Daniel Dennett wrote so many books about that, or at least three. He kind of talks about it in every one of his books in a
Mm.
way, but um, these degrees of freedom is what he talks about, and like and what kind of free will do you want, even if you live in a determined universe. But again, I still, even with all of that, it's so hard for me to get around the fact that um, even random things or things like that still doesn't solve the free will problem. It's not, but but then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe is it really a problem? I guess is my. It might not even be a problem. It might just be. It's just. I think we. I just want to feel like I'm free, and yet when I truly think about it, I'm like, ah, man, I cannot get around the fact that I feel like a product of so many things. And the harder I think about it, the more I mean, it can be a little bit frustrating. You know what I mean? And especially if you're into like science and stuff, if you're like religious or whatever, you believe in
Mm.
libertarian free will, that gets you out of the whole ball of wax in your mind. You're not really out of it. But like um yeah, it's just it's a frustrating it's kind of a frustrating topic, and I know that a lot of people tend to just veer away from it because at the end of the day, and I'll ask you this about it, do you think that there's any is there is there any real sense in trying to figure that out, Sam, or is it just
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
something that we oh, okay,
yeah, I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
important. I think it's an important
oh,
question.
okay,
Like
hmm,
it's an interesting topic. It's an important question. It's the fact that it stumps people and seems to cause confusion is itself a reason enough to investigate it, right? So
yeah,
like anything that anyone is confused about
mm.
deserves to be investigated.
And I guess from a moral standpoint, it definitely holds you know, crazy implications. Again, I myself find myself being a determinist, so whenever I see somebody committing a crime, even if it's horrendous, I tend to have within me this ability to like weirdly empathize. And I'll be like, well, I mean, I want them, they need to go to jail. A, because they're, they're harmful to society, whatever the crime was, completely, they need to go to jail. But on the other hand, I'm also thinking not like a barbarian back in the day where we need to draw and quarter the person because I'm like, there is no, there again, there's sort of a product of crazy brain stuff and
Ah,
maybe something
okay.
happened to them. It's a difficult, it's morally it's has implications.
Yeah, so I actually sympathize with that sentiment. The way I think about that is that, well, for one thing, prison is kind of a harsh and rudimentary device. Like we
Hmm.
said, we've have a bad history of this kind of thing where people used to be tortured to death, and uh, preferably we would have forms of punishment which are they aim to reintegrate people into society and things like that.
Mm.
Um, both because it is a tremendous cost to them and also to us. And uh, yeah, there must be better ways of doing this. Again, that I think that you can have that point of view that there should be better ways of uh, punishing people or of reforming them or of making sure that they will not commit the same crimes again
Mm.
uh, than what we have now. But at the same time, say, well, they are in fact uh, liable for the damages that they cause. So, for instance, there is a difference between someone, uh, let's say you have a case where someone is driving a car and their brakes malfunction, so they cannot brake, and then they hit another car.
Hmm.
That case is different from the case in which someone was trying to flee the cops because they committed a robbery, or a case in which someone is just speeding because they are enjoying it. Like in
Hmm.
the one case, you can say that it really was not up to them anymore whether or not they could brake. Like they are liable, perhaps because they did not take proper care of their car, but at the moment that they could not brake anymore, they didn't matter what they wanted to do, they just literally could not brake. Whereas in other cases, like trying to escape the police and in trying to, or just in reckless driving cases, they are responsible because it is their choices which are driving their behavior and
Mm.
driving uh, it's part of why they drive the car into another person or into another car or whatever. So there is a difference between really being unable to choose differently and freely choosing to do something. Same with when someone is being coerced, say, like if you have a gun pressed to your head and you're being asked to do certain things, well, at that point, you are no longer free to do as you want. You're being coerced into performing certain actions, like maybe giving up your wallet or whatever. So that,
Mm.
and there are meaningful distingue you can meaningfully distinguish between these cases. I think law has distinctions for these, how to treat these cases separately. And morally, they are also distinct because, again, people could, there are cases where people could clearly act differently. And there's cases where, like, if the brake of your car is malfunctioning, then you cannot brake, you cannot prevent the car from crashing into another one.
Hmm.
And
It
yeah, that factors into our thinking about free will. Like, because in a way, if you say, well, there is no such thing as free will, then every case of someone driving into another car is like the brakes malfunctioning, but that also does not quite make sense.
Right. Yeah, it's the well that's while you were talking, I was sort of thinking like again, like I struggle with this because I'm like, it's all kind of a case of it's the malfunctioning brakes all the way down, like turtles all the way down.
Yes.
And because even the person that's holding the person up in that situation, in that hypothetical situation, the robber is like a malfunctioning brake all the way down in a sense. And this is the again, this is my conundrum, and it's like I feel like I'm on a when I think about the free will stuff and determinism and compatibilism, I feel like I'm like a record that's skipping because I
Mm,
can't. It's like, oh man, I want to be. I mean, at the end of the day, I just operate in the world and it doesn't bother me and nothing bother. But if I just sit here and think about it, I'm like, I tend to, I guess, live my life like Daniel Dennett,
mm, yeah,
describes. However, when I truly think deeply about it, I'm like, on the other hand, I'm really just a product of the universe who is operating and I don't know why I'm doing what I do. I mean, I do, but again, you get into this crazy thing that happens.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
So,
so go ahead.
uh,
I'm sorry, Sam.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, well, again, one other thing to say in that case is this is also a little bit paradoxical, I suppose. But uh, if you are a determinist, then you can also say, well, the reason why we put people in prison is because it deterministically, or at least very reliably, prevents further crimes from happening.
Hmm.
That's the other. I mean, that is there's some tension there because on the one hand, uh, people who are in favor of the free will theory, of the idea that there is free will also say, well, that's why we need to put people in prison because it's the consequence of their freely chosen actions. But
Mm,
the other side of the coin is that you can say, well, uh, we know that if you impose costs on certain actions, then that will pretty reliably deter people.
mm,
And
mm,
so, even as a determinist, you can say, so therefore, by imposing these costs on them after the fact, you are changing their behavior, but it's still compatible with determinism because
right. Yeah. Again, it's like, and what you just described is how I think about it.
mm,
And, but it's weird because you put it this way, I wouldn't have this conversation with anybody other than people that like are into philosophy or are into like stuff like this because other people just on the street would be like, "What are you freaking talking about?" Like it's not like a norm. People are like, and on a jury pool, they're not. I mean, it's a little bit hard to persuade people with these kinds of arguments unless they're like adept with philosophical thinking. Um, okay, so we've come up on 12:35. Sam, I don't want to keep you any longer, but just to end this off with something kind of fun. Actually, my family even just got home, so they'll walk in here in a second. But what do you like to watch right now? Or what is on your watch list if you're going to Netflix or anything like that? What is your thing? This is just to end sort of a fun thing.
right. Well, I've just finished watching The Rookie. I don't know if you know that. It's
Oh,
with Nathan Fillion.
oh,
The
okay,
Rookie.
yeah, yeah. How's that?
I really enjoyed it. I binged all of it with my girlfriend, and
Oh,
uh,
that's
I,
cool.
yeah, I liked it a lot.
Cool,
And
cool.
um, yeah, I don't know what else I'm watching at the moment, to be honest. But The Rookie was excellent. I recommend The Rookie. That was great.
Mm.
I yeah, Nathan Fillion I liked from Firefly, and it was nice to see
Oh
him
yeah, 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 yeah.
Firefly Castle. Castle's another show which I enjoy a lot. So
Okay.
so this is like my latest Nathan Fillion show that I could binge.
Man, well that's cool. That's good to know. All right, Sam. Well, yeah, my family just walked in the door, so this is a perfect time to end here. This has
Oh,
been awesome. And everybody again, check out the Conjecture Institute dot I don't even know if it just Google Conjecture Institute. I don't know what the dot is, but it's an org or a com or whatever. Anyways, though, awesome to talk to you, Sam. This is the
thanks.
Falsifiable